Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's ViDevo. This morning we are in Mark chapter 8, verses 1 through 21, which say this. During those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way, because some of them have come a long distance. His disciples answered, But where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. When he had taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people, and they did so. They had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them also and told the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. About 4,000 were present. After he had sent them away, he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the region of Dalmanutha. Now, right about there, some of you, I'm guessing, might be going, didn't we already read that passage a few chapters ago? But that's a cool thing. Jesus apparently actually did this type of miracle more than once. Which actually goes with our main point for today. But let's read on a little bit more before we get to the main point. Verse 11. The Pharisees came and began to question Jesus. To test him, they asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and said, Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it. Then he left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread except for 1 loaf they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. And yeast back in that culture was often used as a metaphor for evil. Because just like how a little tiny bit of yeast would work all through a batch of dough, just a little evil in someone's life could work all throughout their life or even all throughout their, congregation. And Jesus is saying, watch out for the evil of the Pharisees and that of Herod. But the disciples don't quite make that connection. So verse 16, they discussed this with one another and said, it's because we have no bread. Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember? Keep that verse in mind. Don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? That was the first time. 12, they replied. Verse 20, and when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? They answered, 7. He said to them, Do you still not understand? And one thing that I really hope we will understand this morning is this. Jesus is consistent in his character. Jesus is consistent in his character. The Bible actually talks in a few places about how God doesn't change. He himself says that in Malachi. I think it's the book of Hebrews says that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Which is great news for us, really, right? Because it means that we can come to know God. We can learn to trust him because he's not some moody being where he might act one way today and act in a completely different way next time. No, he's consistent in his character. And that's one reason why I think it's so important to do what Jesus kind of prodded his disciples to do here and remember the things that he does in our lives. To even make a note of it, to even keep a journal of answered prayers or just downright miracles that you see God do in your life. Because those kinds of things, writing that down can help you know him better. And the next time you need God to come through for you in some way, you have something to look back on. When you go to pray, something God's been teaching me a lot more lately. The Bible says when you pray, pray with thanksgiving. When you're praying about worries, bring those worries to God, but pray with thanksgiving. Man, when you go to pray with thanksgiving, you have all these things you've written down to look back on to thank God for. You have things like King David did right before his battle with Goliath, if you know the story. You have things you can go back to that God did in your past that you can look at to give you hope and courage and even understanding for the present and the future. So my challenge to you today is this. If you don't already have one, start a God Things journal. You can buy like a 50-cent notebook at Target or Walmart or the dollar store. I guess it'd be $1 at the dollar store. You can use the Notes app on your smartphone. You can even download a journal app for fairly cheap. There's one called Day One I use. That's a great app. But whatever the case, Jesus is consistent in his character, and he will do things in your life. He's doing things in your life right now. What are they? Write them down. And as Jesus himself encouraged his disciples to do, remember.